Chapter 1. A Star is Born. The sun rose over the bustling city of Tunis. The air was filled with the sounds of merchants calling out their wares and the clatter of horse-drawn carts on the cobbled streets. In this lively city, full of life and noise, a baby boy was born. His name was Ibn Khaldoun. The Khaldoun family was well known in Tunis. They were proud, educated, and wealthy. They had come from Andalusia, fleeing wars and unrest, bringing their knowledge and traditions with them. They lived in a grand house with white walls and an open courtyard. But wealth did not always mean peace. The world outside their home was dangerous. Political turmoil was everywhere. Young Ibn Khaldoun's parents dreamed of a bright future for him. His father often whispered, "You will do great things, my son. You will learn. You will be wise." These words stayed with Ibn Khaldoun as he grew. But life, even for a wealthy boy, was not without challenges. From a young age, Ibn Khaldoun was curious. He loved to sit in the courtyard, listening to the stories of travelers. They spoke of distant lands, great battles, and powerful rulers. His eyes would widen as he imagined those faraway places. One day he asked his father, "Why do kings rise and fall? Why do some lands prosper and others fade away?" His father smiled and said, "One day you will find the answers, but first you must learn." At the age of 7, Ibn Khaldoun began his formal education. His father was his first teacher. He taught Ibn Khaldoun to read and write, starting with the Quran. "These words will guide you," his father said. But young Ibn Khaldoun wanted more. He asked questions no one could answer. Why do people fight wars? Why do some people have power and others do not? His teachers would often pause, surprised by his curiosity. Outside the Khaldoun home, life was changing rapidly. The Maghreb, the region that included Tunis, was unstable. Rival dynasties fought for control. Sometimes the streets of Tunis were filled with soldiers. Ibn Khaldoun's mother would pull him close and say, "Stay inside." It is not safe. But Ibn Khaldoun would peek through the wooden shutters, watching the chaos outside. He wondered why people fought so fiercely for power. When he was 10, tragedy struck. A terrible plague swept through the region. It did not spare the Khaldoun family. Ibn Khaldoun's parents both fell ill. He sat by their side, holding their hands and praying. His mother's voice grew weak as she said, "Be strong, my son. Learn. Use your mind to understand the world." Her words, spoken with love and pain, stayed with him forever. After his parents' death, Ibn Khaldoun was left with deep sadness. But he was also determined. He wanted to honor his parents' wishes. He threw himself into his studies. Every morning, he would walk to the madrasa, a place where scholars gathered to teach. The madrasa was a world of books, ideas, and debates. Ibn Khaldoun loved it. His teachers noticed something special about him. He was not just a student, he was a thinker. He would listen carefully, then ask bold questions. Why do empires fall? Is it because of greed or something else? Some teachers shook their heads, saying, "You think too much for your age?" Others smiled and said, "One day you will be a great scholar." But life was not all books and learning. Tunis was still a city of danger and change. One day, when Ibn Khaldoun was a teenager, soldiers stormed the city. They fought in the streets, setting buildings on fire. The Khaldoun home was spared, but Ibn Khaldoun felt the fear in his heart. He asked himself, why must people destroy each other? Is there no other way? As the city recovered, Ibn Khaldoun began to see patterns in the chaos around him. He noticed how power shifted from one leader to another. He saw how people suffered during times of instability. These observations would later shape his greatest work, but at the time, they were just thoughts in the mind of a curious boy. Despite the challenges, Ibn Khaldoun's education continued. He studied not only religion, but also philosophy, mathematics, and poetry. He loved the works of great thinkers like Aristotle and Plato. Their ideas lit a fire in his mind. But he did not just accept their wisdom. He questioned it. Do their ideas apply to our world? He wondered. One day, an elderly scholar visited the madrasa. He had traveled far and wide and had seen many things. Ibn Khaldoun listened to him with great interest. The scholar spoke of the rise and fall of empires, of how history repeated itself. Ibn Khaldoun was fascinated. He asked, why does history repeat? Is it fate, or is there a reason? The scholar smiled and said, you have the mind of a historian, young man. Follow your questions, and you may find answers. At night, Ibn Khaldoun would sit under the stars, thinking about what he had learned. He would remember his father's words, you will do great things. But he also remembered his mother's warning, be strong. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy. Still, he felt a spark of hope. He believed that understanding the world was possible. Years passed, and Ibn Khaldoun grew into a young man. He was not just a student anymore. He was ready to step into the world. But the world outside was harsh. Political power in the Maghreb was unstable. Leaders rose and fell quickly. Ibn Khaldoun knew he would have to navigate this world carefully. He also knew that his questions about life, power, and society would guide him. As he stood at the edge of adulthood, Ibn Khaldoun felt both excitement and fear. He did not know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He was ready to begin his journey. The boy from Tunis, with his curious mind and brave heart, was about to change the world. Chapter 2. The Curious Student. The classroom was quiet, except for the sound of Ibn Khaldoun's pen scratching against the paper. The sun streamed through the tall windows, lighting up rows of students sitting on cushions, their books open before them. Ibn Khaldoun, now a young boy, sat near the front. His eyes sparkled with curiosity. He loved this place, where ideas came alive. From the moment he entered the madrasa, Ibn Khaldoun knew he was different. Other students listened carefully, copying their teacher's words without question. But not Ibn Khaldoun. He wanted to understand, not just memorize. When his teacher spoke about the movements of the stars, Ibn Khaldoun raised his hand and asked, "But why do they move in this way? Could it be for a reason we do not yet know?" The teacher paused, surprised. It was a question no one had asked before. In those days, education was highly respected. Young boys learned to read and write, starting with the Quran. But Ibn Khaldoun's lessons did not stop there. His teachers introduced him to the great works of philosophy, mathematics, and science. He studied the ideas of Aristotle, Plato, and Avicenna. Each book was a door to a new world. At first, some teachers found his questions challenging. "Why does Aristotle say this?" Ibn Khaldoun would ask. "What if he is wrong?" These questions made his teachers frown. One of them said, "You must not question the wisdom of the ancients. It is enough to learn their words." But Ibn Khaldoun could not stop himself. He believed that understanding came from asking questions. His favorite subjects were philosophy and history. Philosophy made him think deeply about life and the universe. History, on the other hand, told stories of kings and empires. He loved to hear about how rulers came to power and how they lost it. One day, while studying an old manuscript, he asked his teacher, "What if there is a pattern in history? What if we could find rules to explain why empires rise and fall?" The teacher raised an eyebrow and said, "That is a bold thought, young man. Perhaps one day you will find the answer." Ibn Khaldoun was not just a thinker, he was also a poet. In the evenings, after a long day of study, he would sit under the stars and write verses. His poems were about life, love, and the mysteries of the world. His words were simple, but beautiful. When he read them aloud to his friends, they clapped and cheered. They called him the young philosopher poet. Life at the madrasa was not all serious study. There were moments of laughter and friendship, too. Ibn Khaldoun made friends with boys from different families and backgrounds. They played games, shared meals, and sometimes argued about ideas. Ibn Khaldoun's best friend, Yusuf, once said to him, "You will be famous one day. I can see it in the way you speak. You are not afraid to think differently." Ibn Khaldoun laughed and said, "Famous? I only want to learn." But his journey as a student was not without challenges. The political instability in the Maghreb often disrupted daily life. One day, soldiers entered the city, looking for rebels. The sound of horses and shouting filled the air. Classes were canceled, and students were sent home. Ibn Khaldoun sat with his family, feeling both fear and anger. He asked himself, why must people fight? What causes this chaos? These thoughts stayed with him, shaping the questions he would explore later in life. Despite the turmoil, Ibn Khaldoun's thirst for knowledge never faded. He began to read books outside the curriculum. He found works on astronomy, geography, and medicine. Each subject fascinated him. He wanted to know how the stars moved, how the earth was shaped, and how the human body worked. His curiosity was endless. One day, a traveling scholar came to the madrasa. He was an old man with a long beard and sharp eyes. He carried with him rare books from faraway lands. The students gathered around him, eager to learn. The scholar spoke about the rise and fall of great civilizations. He told stories of the Roman Empire, the Persian kings, and the caliphs of Baghdad. Ibn Khaldoun listened intently, his mind racing. He asked, "Do all empires fall? Is there a way to stop it?" The scholar smiled and said, "Ah, young man, that is a question for a lifetime." The scholar noticed something special in Ibn Khaldoun. He took him aside and said, "You have a sharp mind and a brave heart. But remember, knowledge is not just about books. It is about understanding the world around you." These words stayed with Ibn Khaldoun. He began to see his studies not just as lessons, but as tools to understand life. As the years passed, Ibn Khaldoun's reputation as a brilliant student grew. People began to notice his talent. His teachers said, "He has the mind of a philosopher and the heart of a poet." But Ibn Khaldoun remained humble. He knew he still had much to learn. One day, as he was reading in the library, he found an old book about ancient rulers. The book described how a powerful king lost his throne because of greed and corruption. Ibn Khaldoun thought deeply about this story. He wondered, is there a lesson here? Could greed be a reason why leaders fail, or is it something more? These thoughts began to form in his mind, like seeds waiting to grow. At night, he would sit in the courtyard, watching the stars. He thought about all he had learned. He thought about the questions that no one could answer. He whispered to himself, "One day I will find the answers. One day I will understand." But his path was not yet clear. He was still a student, still searching. The road ahead was long, filled with challenges and discoveries. Yet Ibn Khaldoun felt ready. His mind was sharp, his heart was strong, and his curiosity was endless. This was just the beginning of his journey. The young student from Tunis was destined to become one of the greatest thinkers the world had ever known. Chapter 3. Trouble in the Kingdom. The sun rose over the city, casting its golden light on the palace walls. Inside, Ibn Khaldoun stood quietly, waiting. His heart beat fast. He had been invited to the court of the Sultan, a place filled with power, wealth, and danger. It was the start of a new chapter in his life, a chapter that would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. Ibn Khaldoun was no longer a boy. He was a young man, clever and ambitious. His reputation as a scholar had spread, and powerful men began to notice him. They saw his sharp mind and thought he could be useful. One day, a messenger arrived at his door with an invitation. "The Sultan wishes to see you," the messenger said. Ibn Khaldoun's hands trembled as he held the letter. He knew this was a great opportunity, but he also knew it could be dangerous. The Sultan's court was a place of luxury. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and rich carpets covered the floors. But behind the beauty, there was tension. Kings and leaders fought constantly for power. Alliances were made and broken. trust was rare. Ibn Khaldoun could feel the weight of this world as he walked into the grand hall. He bowed before the Sultan, his mind racing. What would the Sultan ask of him? What would he have to do? The Sultan was impressed by Ibn Khaldoun's intelligence. He made him an official, giving him an important role in the court. Ibn Khaldoun worked hard. He advised the Sultan on matters of state, using his knowledge of history and human behavior to help make decisions. At first, it was exciting. Ibn Khaldoun felt proud to serve his leader. But soon, he began to see the darker side of politics. Rivalries in the court were fierce. Ministers and advisors competed for the Sultan's favor. They whispered secrets and spread lies to destroy one another. Ibn Khaldoun tried to stay out of these schemes, but it was impossible. One day, a fellow advisor approached him. "If you do not stand with me, you will fall," the man said, his voice cold. Ibn Khaldoun realized that he had to choose sides, but every choice felt dangerous. Outside the palace, the kingdom was in chaos. Neighboring rulers threatened war, and rebellion grew in the countryside. The Sultan relied on Ibn Khaldoun more and more. "What should I do?" the Sultan asked, his voice heavy with worry. Ibn Khaldoun gave his advice carefully, knowing that a single mistake could cost him his position or his life. One night, as he sat in his chamber, Ibn Khaldoun felt the weight of his decisions. He thought about his role in the court. Was he helping the Sultan, or was he just another piece in a dangerous game? He remembered his father's words. "Be wise, but stay true to yourself." Ibn Khaldoun wondered if he could do both. The turning point came during a rebellion. A powerful noble rose up against the Sultan, gathering an army to challenge the throne. The Sultan called a meeting of his advisors. The room was filled with tension as the Sultan looked at Ibn Khaldoun. "You are my most trusted advisor," the Sultan said. "What should we do?" Ibn Khaldoun felt all eyes on him. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We must act with caution. A strong response could end this quickly, but we must not create more enemies." The Sultan nodded, but Ibn Khaldoun could see doubt in his eyes. The rebellion was crushed, but at a great cost. Many lives were lost, and the kingdom was weakened. Some in the court blamed Ibn Khaldoun. "He advised the Sultan poorly," they whispered. Others defended him, saying, "He saved us from greater disaster." Ibn Khaldoun knew that his position was no longer secure. The Sultan began to distance himself from Ibn Khaldoun. New advisors came to power, men who saw Ibn Khaldoun as a threat. One day, the Sultan summoned him. "I can no longer protect you," the Sultan said. "You must leave the court." Ibn Khaldoun felt a mix of relief and sadness. He had given everything to serve the kingdom, but now he was cast out. As he left the palace, Ibn Khaldoun felt the cool night air on his face. He looked up at the stars, thinking about what lay ahead. He was no longer part of the Sultan's world, but he was free. For the first time in years, He could follow his own path. But freedom came with challenges. Without the support of the court, Ibn Khaldoun had to find a way to survive. He traveled to other cities, offering his knowledge to those who would listen. Some welcomed him as a great scholar. Others saw him as a man who had failed in politics. Ibn Khaldoun accepted both praise and criticism with humility. He knew that his journey was far from over. During this time, Ibn Khaldoun began to think deeply about his experiences. He reflected on the rise and fall of rulers, the struggles for power, and the chaos of rebellion. He saw patterns in these events, patterns that seemed to repeat across history. These thoughts began to take shape in his mind, like pieces of a puzzle coming together. Ibn Khaldoun wrote in his journal, filling its pages with his observations. "Why do leaders fail?" he asked. "What causes kingdoms to collapse?" He looked back at his time in the Sultan's court and realized that he had learned valuable lessons. He had seen human nature at its best and worst. These lessons would become the foundation of his greatest work. Despite the hardships, Ibn Khaldoun felt a sense of purpose. He had left the dangerous world of politics, but he had gained something far more valuable: insight. He was ready to turn his experiences into wisdom that could help others understand the world. As he traveled, Ibn Khaldoun began to share his ideas. People listened, amazed by his ability to explain the complexities of power and leadership. They saw him not as a failed politician, but as a thinker and a guide. Ibn Khaldoun realized that his true strength was not in serving kings, but in understanding the forces that shaped their rise and fall. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ibn Khaldoun was no longer afraid. He had faced the dangers of the court and survived. Now, he was free to follow his curiosity and seek the answers to the questions that had always burned in his mind. The young man from Tunis, who had once walked nervously into the Sultan's court, was now a man with a mission. He would continue his journey, not as a servant of kings, but as a seeker of truth. The challenges he had faced had shaped him, and he was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 4. A Prisoner of Fate. The heavy doors slammed shut behind Ibn Khaldoun. The sound echoed through the stone walls of the prison. He stood still for a moment, his breath caught in his chest. The room was dark and cold. The air smelled of damp earth and despair. He had never imagined that his journey would bring him here. Betrayed. The word rang in his mind like a bell. He had trusted the Sultan, believed in his word. But now, he was a prisoner, a pawn in the dangerous game of politics. His rivals had whispered lies, turning the Sultan against him. And the Sultan had believed them. Ibn Khaldoun sat on the rough floor, his back against the wall. His hands trembled as he thought of everything he had lost. He was no longer an advisor, no longer respected. The court that once praised him now called him a traitor. He clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest. "How could they do this to me?" he whispered. The days in the prison were long and lonely. The only sounds were the footsteps of guards and the occasional cries of other prisoners. The light from a small window barely reached his cell. At night, the darkness seemed endless. Ibn Khaldoun wrapped his cloak tightly around him, trying to stay warm. But no amount of cloth could shield him from the cold in his heart. At first, he felt only anger and sadness. He thought of his family, far away and unaware of his fate. He thought of the life he had worked so hard to build. All of it was gone. He felt lost, as if the world had abandoned him. But as the days turned into weeks, something began to change. In the silence of the prison, Ibn Khaldoun's mind began to wander. He started to think deeply, not just about his own life, but about life itself. Why did people betray each other? Why did leaders rise to power, only to fall so quickly? Why was the world so full of chaos and struggle? These questions filled his mind, keeping him awake at night. One morning, as the first rays of sunlight crept into his cell, Ibn Khaldoun picked up a piece of charcoal from the ground. He found a small, flat stone and began to write. The words came slowly at first, but soon they flowed like a river. He wrote about his thoughts, his observations, about the patterns he had seen in the rise and fall of leaders. He remembered the Sultan's court, the rivalries, the lies. He thought of the rebellions and wars that had shaken the kingdom. He began to see connections, patterns that repeated throughout history. Perhaps, he thought, there are rules to this chaos. Perhaps human behavior follows a path we cannot always see. Each day, Ibn Khaldoun wrote more. His cell became a place of ideas, a quiet space where his mind could explore. He thought about power, how it could lift people up, but also destroy them. He thought about greed, ambition, and the fragile nature of trust. Slowly, his anger turned into curiosity. His sadness turned into determination. One night, as he lay on the cold floor, he stared at the ceiling. Maybe this is why I am here, he thought. Not to suffer, but to learn, to understand. It was a small thought, but it gave him strength. The guards noticed a change in him. He no longer begged for his release or cursed his enemies. Instead, he seemed calm, even thoughtful. One guard, curious, asked him, "What are you writing?" Ibn Khaldoun looked up and smiled faintly. "I am writing about life," he said. The guard laughed, shaking his head. "Life? In this place? What is there to say about it?" Ibn Khaldoun simply replied, "More than you can imagine." Months passed. Ibn Khaldoun's beard grew long, and his clothes became worn. But his mind was sharper than ever. His writings filled the walls of his cell, every inch covered with ideas and questions. He began to see history not as a series of random events, but as a cycle. Kingdoms rose and fell like the tides. Leaders came to power, but they were shaped by the people, the environment, and the times they lived in. One day, a fellow prisoner, an old man with a kind face, spoke to Ibn Khaldoun. "You are different," the man said. "Most of us waste away in this place, but you are building something." Ibn Khaldoun nodded. "I am trying to understand why the world is the way it is, he said. I want to find meaning in all this chaos. The old man smiled. That is a noble goal, he said. But be careful. Knowledge can be a heavy burden. Ibn Khaldoun thought about these words. He knew the old man was right. Understanding the world meant seeing its darkest parts. It meant facing truths that others might avoid. But Ibn Khaldoun was not afraid. Finally, after many months, the day of his release came. A guard unlocked the heavy door and said, "You are free to go." Ibn Khaldoun stepped out of the cell, blinking in the sunlight. The world outside felt strange, almost unreal. But he carried something with him, something that had not been taken away, his ideas. As he walked away from the prison, Ibn Khaldoun felt a mix of emotions. He was free, but he was also changed. The betrayal, the loneliness, the darkness, they had shaped him. He no longer saw the world as he once did. He saw it with new eyes, eyes that searched for patterns and meaning. In the months that followed, Ibn Khaldoun began to write more seriously. His time in prison had given him a new purpose. He wanted to share what he had learned, to help others see the cycles of history and the truths of human behavior. His writings would later become the foundation of his greatest work, the Muqaddimah. The young man who had entered the Sultan's court full of ambition was now a thinker, a seeker of truth. He had faced betrayal and imprisonment, but he had emerged stronger. His time as a prisoner of fate had given him the freedom of thought, a freedom that would change the world forever. Chapter 5. Freedom and a New Beginning. The gates creaked open, and Ibn Khaldoun stepped outside. The sunlight was bright, almost blinding after the darkness of his prison cell. He stopped for a moment, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. The air smelled fresh, free. After many months of confinement, he was finally released. But as he looked around, he realized something. Freedom did not feel the way he had imagined. The city was not as he remembered. The streets were quieter, the markets less lively. The faces of the people seemed tired, burdened. The political struggles that had sent him to prison had left their mark on everyone. Ibn Khaldoun walked slowly through the streets, feeling like a stranger in his own land. He returned to his family's home, a place that had once been filled with warmth and laughter. Now, it felt empty. His brothers greeted him with relief, but their smiles were faint. "You are back," one of them said. "But things have changed. Life is harder now." Ibn Khaldoun nodded. He understood. His time in prison had changed him too. That night, as he sat in his old room, he stared at the blank pages of his journal. He felt lost. The world outside was different, and so was he. The ambitions that had once driven him no longer seemed important. Politics, power, influence, they had brought him nothing but pain. He had been betrayed, imprisoned, and cast aside. Now, he wanted something different. But what? The answer came slowly, like the first light of dawn. He thought about the lessons he had learned in prison, the deep truths he had uncovered about life and human behavior. He realized that these lessons were more valuable than any political position. He still had his mind, his ideas, and his passion for knowledge. Perhaps he could use them to rebuild his life. In the days that followed, Ibn Khaldoun made a decision. He would leave politics behind. No more court intrigue, no more power struggles. Instead, he would focus on what he loved most, learning and writing. It was a bold choice. In a world ruled by kings and armies, the life of a scholar was not always easy. But Ibn Khaldoun was determined. He began by gathering his old books and manuscripts. Some were worn and faded, but they still held the knowledge he needed. He spent hours in his study, reading and taking notes. He revisited the ideas of great thinkers like Aristotle and Avicenna. But this time, he did not just study their works, he questioned them. He asked himself, do their ideas apply to our world? Or is there something they missed? Ibn Khaldoun also began to write again. His pen moved slowly at first, but soon the words came more easily. He wrote about the patterns he had seen in history, the rise and fall of empires, the struggles for power. He wrote about human behavior, why people acted the way they did, and how their actions shaped the world around them. One afternoon, as he sat in his study, a friend came to visit. The man looked surprised to see Ibn Khaldoun surrounded by books and papers. "You are working harder now than you did in the court," he joked. Ibn Khaldoun smiled and said, "In the court, I served others. Now I am serving truth." His friend laughed, but he could see the seriousness in Ibn Khaldoun's eyes. As the weeks turned into months, Ibn Khaldoun's work began to take shape. He was not just writing a book, he was building a new way of thinking. He called it a study of history, but it was more than that. It was a study of life itself, of the forces that shaped human societies. Sometimes the work was exhausting. Ibn Khaldoun would stay up late into the night, his candle burning low. He would read what he had written and feel unsure. Is this the right path? He wondered. But then he would remember the struggles he had faced, the betrayals, the prison, the moments of doubt. Those experiences had given him the strength to keep going. He also found inspiration in the world around him. He visited the markets and listened to the merchants. He traveled to nearby villages and spoke to farmers and craftsmen. Each conversation gave him new insights. He saw how people's lives were connected to the land, to the rulers above them, and to the history they carried with them. One day, while writing, Ibn Khaldoun paused and looked out of the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. He thought about his journey, how far he had come, and how much he had learned. He realized that his freedom was not just the absence of prison walls. It was the freedom to think, to question, to create. But his path was not without challenges. Some people doubted him. "Why waste your time on books?" they asked. "The world is ruled by swords, not pens." Others accused him of abandoning his responsibilities. You could be helping rulers make better decisions, they said. But Ibn Khaldun knew that his work was important. He believed that understanding history and human behavior could change the world in its own way. As his writing progressed, Ibn Khaldun began to feel a sense of purpose. He no longer felt lost. Each word he wrote, each idea he explored, brought him closer to something greater. He was not just recording history. He was uncovering the truths that shaped it. One evening, a young student came to visit him. The boy was eager to learn, his eyes bright with curiosity. He asked Ibn Khaldun about his work, about the ideas he was exploring. Ibn Khaldun spoke with passion, explaining his thoughts in simple terms. The boy listened closely, nodding. When he left, he said, "You are building something amazing, master." Ibn Khaldun smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. Years later, Ibn Khaldun would look back on this period of his life as a turning point. It was a time of rebuilding, of finding himself again. It was when he discovered his true calling, not as a servant of kings, but as a servant of knowledge. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Ibn Khaldun dipped his pen in ink and continued to write. He knew that his journey was far from over. The world outside might have changed, but his purpose was clear. He would dedicate his life to learning, to writing, to understanding the truths that connected all of humanity. The young scholar, who had once entered the Sultan's court with dreams of power, had now found something far more valuable. He had found freedom, not just of the body, but of the mind and soul. Before we begin, Chapter 6, a quick note for our listeners. You're currently listening to this audiobook on WooEnglish. Remember, this content is specially made for WooEnglish listeners only. If you're hearing it on any other channel, it may be a violation of WooEnglish's rights. Please ensure you're tuned into the right source to fully enjoy and respect this audiobook journey. Now, let's continue the story. Chapter 6, The Birth of the Muqaddimah. The mountains stood tall and silent, their peaks touching the sky. Far from the noise of cities and courts, Ibn Khaldun found himself in a quiet retreat. Here, surrounded by nature, he finally had the peace he needed to think. The air was fresh, the nights were calm, and the world seemed far away. This was where his greatest work would begin. Ibn Khaldun sat at a wooden desk in a small room. A single candle lit the space, its soft glow falling on piles of paper and open books. The sound of the wind outside was the only noise. He dipped his pen in ink and paused. His mind was full of ideas. But where should he start? He thought about everything he had seen and learned. He remembered the bustling cities of his youth, the chaos of courts, the betrayals and struggles. He thought about the patterns he had noticed, the rise and fall of rulers, the cycles of power and decline. He asked himself, why does history repeat itself? Is there a reason? These questions had stayed with him for years. Now he was ready to find the answers. He picked up his pen and began to write. The words came slowly at first, but soon they flowed like a river. This is not just a book about history, Ibn Khaldoun said to himself. It is a book about life, about people, about how we create and destroy societies. He wanted his work to be different from anything that had come before. Most historians only told stories of kings and battles, but Ibn Khaldoun wanted to go deeper. He wanted to understand why things happened. Each day, he worked tirelessly. He wrote about human behavior, about greed, ambition, and the search for power. He wrote about how geography and the environment shaped societies. He even wrote about the role of religion and culture. His ideas were bold, new, and unlike anything anyone had written before. Sometimes the work was difficult. There were moments of doubt when Ibn Khaldoun wondered if his ideas were too complex. He would put down his pen and stare at the mountains outside. But then, he would remember the struggles he had faced in life, the betrayals, the prison, the loss. Those experiences had taught him to be strong. He picked up his pen again and continued. One evening, as he reviewed his notes, he felt a sense of excitement. I am not just writing about the past, he thought. I am uncovering the patterns of history. I am finding the truths that connect all human societies. He realized that his work was more than a history book. It was a guide to understanding the world. Ibn Khaldoun's ideas were revolutionary. He argued that societies followed a cycle. They started small and strong, with leaders who worked hard to build their kingdoms. Over time, as these societies grew wealthy, they became weak. Leaders became greedy, and people lost their sense of purpose. Eventually, the society would collapse, and a new one would rise in its place. This idea shocked many people. Most historians simply described events. But Ibn Khaldoun was explaining why they happened. He used logic and observation, not just tradition or stories. History is not just a record of the past, he wrote. It is the study of human nature. As the weeks turned into months, the Muqaddimah began to take shape. The word Muqaddimah means introduction. Ibn Khaldoun called his work this because he saw it as the beginning of a new way of thinking. It was not just an introduction to history. It was an introduction to understanding life itself. One day, a young student came to visit Ibn Khaldoun. The boy had heard about his work and was eager to learn. He asked, "Master, why do you spend so much time writing? What are you trying to achieve?" Ibn Khaldoun smiled and said, "I am trying to answer the questions that have puzzled people for centuries. I want to help others see the patterns of life so they can understand the world better." The boy nodded, his eyes wide with wonder. "Will your book help people in the future?" he asked. Ibn Khaldoun's smile grew. "That is my hope," he said. But not everyone supported his work. Some people thought his ideas were too daring. "He is questioning traditions," they said. Others believed that his focus on logic and observation was wrong. History is about faith, not reason, they argued. But Ibn Khaldoun did not let their criticism stop him. He believed in his ideas and knew they were important. As he worked, he drew on everything he had learned. He used stories from his own life, as well as lessons from the books he had read. He combined history, philosophy, and sociology into a single work. The result was something truly unique. The Muqaddimah was not just about kings and wars. It was about people, their hopes, their struggles, their achievements, and their failures. It was about how societies grew strong and how they fell apart. It was about understanding the forces that shaped the world. One evening, as Ibn Khaldoun wrote the final pages of his manuscript, he felt a sense of peace. The candle flickered beside him, its light dancing on the walls. He put down his pen and looked at the pile of papers before him. "This is my life's work," he thought. "It is my gift to the world." He knew that his book might not be understood by everyone. Its ideas were complex, and its approach was new, but he also knew that it was important. Even if only a few people understand it now, he thought, perhaps future generations will see its value. The next day, Ibn Khaldoun walked outside. The sun was shining, and the mountains looked majestic against the blue sky. He felt a sense of accomplishment. His journey had not been easy, but it had led him to this moment. The Muqaddimah was more than a book. It was a reflection of Ibn Khaldoun's life, his struggles, his questions, and his search for truth. It was a testament to the power of knowledge and the importance of understanding the world around us. As he returned to his study, Ibn Khaldoun felt a renewed sense of purpose. His work was not finished. The Muqaddimah was just the beginning. There was still much to learn, much to write, and much to share. The quiet retreat in the mountains had given him the space he needed to create. Now, he was ready to take his ideas to the world. Ibn Khaldoun had not just written a book, he had created a legacy that would last for centuries. Chapter 7. The Scholar's Struggles. The morning sun rose slowly, but Ibn Khaldoun barely noticed. He sat at his desk, staring at the papers before him. The Muqaddimah was far from finished, and the weight of his task pressed heavily on him. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up his pen. It wasn't the work itself that troubled him. It was everything else. Far away, his family waited for him. His heart ached for them. He thought of his children's laughter, his wife's comforting words, and the warmth of home. But here he was, alone in his retreat, far from the people he loved most. He had chosen this path, yet the loneliness was hard to bear. Adding to his pain was the criticism he faced. Jealous rivals whispered behind his back. "He thinks he is better than us," they said. "What makes him so special?" Others dismissed his work entirely. "Why waste time on theories? What good are they?" These words reached Ibn Khaldoun, and though he tried to ignore them, they stung. One afternoon, a messenger arrived with news from the city. Ibn Khaldoun eagerly opened the letter, hoping for word from his family. But the news was bitter. His rivals were spreading lies about him, accusing him of abandoning his duties. They called him arrogant, a man who thought he knew more than anyone else. He set the letter down and closed his eyes. His mind raced. Why do they hate me? He wondered. All I want is to understand the world, to share what I've learned. He clenched his fists, feeling the anger rise within him. But then he took a deep breath and let it go. He had no time for anger. His work was too important. Ibn Khaldoun found solace in his writing. The Muqaddimah was not just a book. It was his way of making sense of the world. Each word he wrote brought him closer to understanding the patterns of history. He poured his heart into the work, using the pain of his struggles to fuel his ideas. But the challenges didn't stop. Supplies ran low, and there were days when he had little to eat. The simple life in his retreat was far from the comforts of the court. Yet, Ibn Khaldoun found strength in the quiet. The silence allowed him to think deeply, to focus on his ideas. One evening, as he sat by the fire, he thought about his critics. They had mocked him, but their words only confirmed what he already knew. They do not see the truth, he said to himself, but one day they will. He realized that true greatness often comes with resistance. Despite the hardships, there were moments of joy. A traveler once visited him, bringing news from distant lands. They spoke for hours, sharing stories of kings and empires. The traveler listened with awe as Ibn Khaldoun explained his ideas. Your work is unlike anything I've heard before, the man said. It will change the way people think. These words gave Ibn Khaldoun hope. They reminded him why he had started this journey. He wasn't writing for fame or approval. He was writing for the future, for those who would come after him. As the months passed, Ibn Khaldoun faced another trial. A letter arrived from his family, bringing news of illness. His youngest child was unwell, and his wife was struggling to care for them alone. Tears filled his eyes as he read the letter. He wanted to be with them, to hold them, to help. But he knew that returning now would mean abandoning his work. He spent the night in prayer, asking for strength. The next morning, he wrote a letter to his wife, promising to return as soon as he could. I am doing this for us, he wrote, for our children, for their future. The pain of separation weighed heavily on him, but he refused to give up. He worked harder, driven by a sense of purpose. He believed that his ideas could make a difference, that they could help create a better world for his children and others. One stormy night, as rain lashed against the windows, Ibn Khaldoun sat writing by candlelight. The flickering flame cast shadows on the walls, but he didn't notice. He was deep in thought, exploring the cycles of history. He wrote about how societies rose from hardship, grew strong through unity, and eventually fell into decline when leaders became corrupt. His pen moved quickly, the words flowing as if guided by an unseen force. He felt a connection to something greater than himself, a sense that his work was part of a larger purpose. But even as he wrote, doubts crept in. What if I fail? He thought. What if no one understands my work? He paused, staring at the blank space on the page. The silence of the room seemed overwhelming. In that moment, he remembered the lessons of his past. He had faced betrayal, imprisonment, and loss. Yet, he had survived. He realized that the struggles he faced now were no different. They were tests, challenges meant to strengthen him. He picked up his pen again and wrote a simple sentence. Struggle is the path to greatness. The words gave him comfort. He realized that the difficulties he faced were not obstacles. They were part of the journey. As dawn broke, Ibn Khaldoun looked at the pages before him. The Muqaddimah was taking shape. It was still far from complete, but it was alive with ideas, with passion, with truth. He smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. In the days that followed, he found new energy. He wrote about the role of religion in society, the importance of justice, and the dangers of greed. His ideas were bold, but they were rooted in his observations and experiences. He knew that his work would not please everyone. Some would reject his ideas, others would misunderstand them. But he also knew that true knowledge was not about pleasing others. It was about seeking the truth, no matter how difficult. As the sun set one evening, Ibn Khaldoun stood outside his retreat, looking at the mountains in the distance. The struggles he faced were far from over, but he felt ready to face them. He had found strength in his pain, purpose in his loneliness. The Muqaddimah was more than a book. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It was proof that even in the face of criticism and loss, one could create something meaningful. Ibn Khaldoun returned to his desk, the candle flickering beside him. He picked up his pen and began to write again, his heart filled with determination. His journey was far from complete, but he knew one thing for certain. He would never give up. Chapter 8. A Meeting with Destiny. The air was thick with tension. Ibn Khaldoun stood at the edge of a grand tent, its colorful fabric swaying gently in the wind. Inside was one of the most feared men in history, Tamerlane, the great conqueror. Known for his strength, his ambition, and his ruthlessness, Tamerlane had built an empire through blood and fire. Now, Ibn Khaldoun was about to meet him face to face. Ibn Khaldoun had been summoned. Tamerlane's army had marched into the region, leaving destruction in its wake. No ruler dared to oppose him, and few survived his wrath. As Ibn Khaldoun approached the tent, he felt the weight of his situation. He was not a soldier or a king. He was a scholar. What could he say to this mighty conqueror? The guards stepped aside, their faces stern. They did not speak, but their silence was louder than words. Ibn Khaldoun entered the tent, his heart beating fast. The room was richly decorated, with rugs and cushions covering the floor. At the center sat Tamerlane, his piercing eyes fixed on Ibn Khaldoun as he approached. Tamerlane was not a tall man, but his presence was immense. His face was marked by years of war, his hands rough and strong, He was a man who commanded respect and fear. Ibn Khaldoun bowed deeply, knowing that one wrong word could mean his death. "Rise," Tamerlane said, his voice low but commanding. Ibn Khaldoun straightened, meeting the conqueror's gaze. He saw intelligence in Tamerlane's eyes, but also danger. This was a man who valued strength above all else. "Who are you?" Tamerlane asked. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to his words. Ibn Khaldoun took a breath and spoke clearly. "I am Ibn Khaldoun, a scholar and historian. I have come to offer my knowledge, if it may serve you." Tamerlane raised an eyebrow. "A scholar?" he said, almost amused. "What use is knowledge in war?" Ibn Khaldoun felt the weight of the question. He knew he had to choose his words carefully. "Knowledge, mighty ruler, is the key to understanding the world," he said. "It is through knowledge that we learn the causes of victory and defeat, the rise and fall of empires." Tamerlane leaned forward, intrigued. "You speak boldly," he said. "Tell me then, why do empires fall?" Ibn Khaldoun's mind raced. He thought of the Muqaddimah, the ideas he had spent years developing. He spoke slowly, his voice steady. "Empires fall, great conqueror, when leaders lose their strength, when greed and corruption take root, when people forget the values that made them great. History shows us this pattern again and again." Tamerlane listened, his expression unreadable. The tent was silent, except for the crackle of a fire in the corner. Ibn Khaldoun continued, his confidence growing. "Your empire, mighty Tamerlane, is strong because of your vision and leadership. But even the greatest empires must be cautious. The seeds of decline can grow unnoticed." For a moment, Tamerlane said nothing. Ibn Khaldoun's words hung in the air like a challenge. Then the conqueror smiled, a small, sharp smile. "You are brave to speak so openly," he said. "Few would dare." Ibn Khaldoun bowed his head. "I speak only the truth," he said. The conversation continued late into the night. Tamerlane asked questions, and Ibn Khaldoun answered with honesty and insight. He spoke of the lessons of history, the cycles of power, and the importance of justice. Tamerlane listened intently, his sharp mind absorbing every word. At one point, Tamerlane leaned back and said, "You are different from the others who come before me. They flatter me, hoping for my favor. But you tell me what I do not want to hear." Ibn Khaldoun hesitated, unsure if this was praise or a warning. "Flattery serves no purpose, mighty ruler," he said carefully. "Only truth can guide us." Tamerlane nodded slowly. "Perhaps you are right," he said. "But truth is dangerous. Not everyone can handle it." The night wore on, and Ibn Khaldoun began to feel a strange sense of calm. He had entered the tent fearing for his life, but now he felt something else: respect. Tamerlane, for all his power and cruelty, was a man who valued wisdom. He did not dismiss Ibn Khaldoun's words. Instead, he considered them. As the meeting came to an end, Tamerlane stood, His guards stepped forward, their hands on their swords. Ibn Khaldoun rose as well, his heart pounding. "You have given me much to think about," Tamerlane said. "You are a wise man, Ibn Khaldoun, perhaps even wiser than you know." Ibn Khaldoun bowed deeply. "I am honored, mighty ruler." Tamerlane's expression hardened. "But remember this," he said. "Wisdom is only valuable if it serves strength. Without power, it is nothing." Ibn Khaldoun nodded, understanding the warning. He knew that Tamerlane's world was one of conquest, not contemplation. Yet, he also knew that his words had made an impact. As Ibn Khaldoun left the tent, the night air felt cool against his face. The stars shone brightly above, and the sounds of the camp filled the air. Horses, fires, the distant murmur of soldiers. He walked slowly, his thoughts racing. He had faced one of the most powerful men in history and survived. But more than that, he had been heard. Tamerlane, the great conqueror, had listened to his ideas. It was a moment Ibn Khaldoun would never forget. That night, as he lay under the stars, Ibn Khaldoun thought about destiny. He realized that his meeting with Tamerlane was more than a test of courage. It was a reminder of the power of knowledge. Even in the face of might, wisdom had its place. The next morning, as the sun rose over the camp, Ibn Khaldoun prepared to leave. His journey was far from over, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had seen the heights of power, the weight of ambition. He had spoken truth to one of the greatest rulers of his time. As he rode away from the camp, he thought about the lessons he had learned. Power could shape the world, but knowledge could guide it. Strength could build empires, but wisdom could sustain them. Ibn Khaldoun smiled faintly. His meeting with destiny had not been easy, but it had strengthened his resolve. He would continue his work, writing and teaching, sharing the truths he had uncovered. The road stretched out before him, and he felt ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 9. A Legacy of Ideas. The Muqaddimah was finished. Ibn Khaldoun held the completed manuscript in his hands, the pages thick with his thoughts and discoveries. He had poured years of his life into this work. It was more than a book. It was a treasure of knowledge, a mirror reflecting the truths of human history and society. At first, few people understood its importance. The ideas were new, bold, and unlike anything written before. Ibn Khaldoun had not just described events, he had uncovered patterns. He explained why empires rose and fell, how societies changed over time, and how human behavior shaped the world. It was not easy to grasp, but those who read it carefully saw its brilliance. The Muqaddimah began to spread. Scholars in the Maghreb were the first to read it. They were astonished by its depth. "This is not just history," one scholar said. "It is a guide to understanding life itself." They shared it with others, who in turn shared it further. The book traveled across the Mediterranean. In Cairo, it reached the great libraries where scholars from many lands gathered. These scholars, who had studied the works of Aristotle and Plato, were amazed by Ibn Khaldoun's ideas. "He has gone beyond the Greeks," they said. "He has found answers they did not." One idea that fascinated readers was Ibn Khaldoun's theory of the cycle of societies. He explained that societies began with strong, hard-working people who built great things. Over time, as these societies became rich, their people grew comfortable. Leaders became corrupt, and unity faded. Eventually, the society weakened and fell. This cycle, Ibn Khaldoun argued, repeated throughout history. Scholars marveled at how Ibn Khaldoun had connected history, sociology, and economics. He showed how geography influenced civilizations, how the environment shaped culture, and how human behavior determined success or failure. His work was a masterpiece of observation and logic. As the Muqaddimah spread further, it reached new lands. In Persia, philosophers admired its depth. In Andalusia, the ideas were discussed in schools and courts. It even traveled to distant lands, inspiring thinkers who would never meet Ibn Khaldoun, but felt his influence. But the spread of his work was not without challenges. Some people rejected his ideas. "He questions tradition," they said. "His thoughts are dangerous." Others argued that his focus on logic ignored the role of faith. Ibn Khaldoun's ideas sparked debate, dividing scholars into those who admired his work and those who feared it. Yet, the Muqaddimah survived. Its ideas could not be silenced. They resonated with those who sought to understand the deeper truths of history and society. Ibn Khaldoun lived to see his work gain recognition, but he could not have imagined its future impact. Centuries later, his ideas would inspire thinkers in Europe during the Renaissance. Historians, sociologists, and philosophers would study his work, calling him a genius ahead of his time. One of his most lasting contributions was the foundation of sociology. Ibn Khaldoun was the first to study society as a whole, to look at how people lived together and how their actions shaped the world. His methods influenced modern sociology, giving scholars the tools to study human behavior scientifically. His work also laid the groundwork for modern economics. He wrote about labor, trade, and the role of wealth in shaping societies. He explained how prosperity could lead to decline if not managed wisely. These ideas were centuries ahead of their time, influencing economists who came long after him. Ibn Khaldoun's influence reached philosophy as well. His focus on reason and observation set him apart from many thinkers of his time. He believed that understanding the world required both faith and logic. This balance made his work unique, bridging the gap between tradition and modernity. As time passed, the Muqaddimah became a treasure of knowledge. Libraries across the world preserved it, ensuring that future generations could learn from Ibn Khaldoun's insights. His name was spoken with respect, not just in the Muslim world, but in many cultures. Even today, Ibn Khaldoun's ideas remain relevant. Historians use his methods to study the past. Sociologists build on his theories to understand society. Economists find wisdom in his analysis of wealth and labor. His work continues to inspire those who seek to understand the complexities of human life. One of the most remarkable things about Ibn Khaldoun was his humility. Despite his achievements, he never sought fame or power. He wrote the Muqaddimah not to glorify himself, but to share his discoveries. He believed that knowledge was a gift to be shared, a light to guide others. Looking back on his life, Ibn Khaldoun saw his struggles as part of his journey. The betrayals, the prison, the loneliness, they had shaped him. They had given him the insight and strength to write something truly extraordinary. He once said, "History is not just a record of events. It is a science of human nature." These words capture the essence of his work. The Muqaddimah was not just a book about the past. It was a guide for understanding the present and the future. As Ibn Khaldoun grew older, he continued to write and teach. He shared his knowledge with students, passing on the ideas that had shaped his life. He believed in the power of education, in the ability of knowledge to change the world. Today, Ibn Khaldoun is remembered as one of the greatest thinkers in history. His legacy is not just in the Muqaddimah, but in the way he approached life, with curiosity, courage, and a deep desire to understand the world. The story of Ibn Khaldoun reminds us that knowledge is powerful. It shows us that even in the face of challenges, one person's ideas can change the course of history. His work continues to inspire, a testament to the enduring power of truth and wisdom. The Muqaddimah is more than a book. It is a legacy. And Ibn Khaldoun, the scholar who created it, remains a guiding light for those who seek to understand the world. Chapter 10. The Teacher of Kings. The grand hall was silent as Ibn Khaldoun entered. Kings and nobles sat on their golden thrones, their eyes fixed on the man before them. They were rulers of vast lands, commanders of mighty armies. Yet they had called for Ibn Khaldoun, a humble scholar. His wisdom, they believed, could guide them through the challenges of leadership. Ibn Khaldoun bowed respectfully, his heart steady. He had grown accustomed to such meetings, but he never let the grandeur of the courts distract him. He saw beyond the riches and power. He understood that even the greatest kings were human. They too struggled with fear, ambition, and the weight of responsibility. The ruler of the court spoke first. "Tell me, Ibn Khaldoun," he said, "how can a king remain strong? How can a kingdom avoid decline?" Ibn Khaldoun listened carefully. His eyes swept across the room, noting the tension on the faces of the advisors. These were important questions, and they demanded honest answers. A kingdom's strength lies not in its wealth or armies, Ibn Khaldoun began, his voice calm and steady. It lies in the unity of its people and the justice of its ruler. Without justice, trust fades, and without trust, a kingdom begins to crumble. The room fell silent. The king leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Ibn Khaldoun's words were simple, but they carried a profound truth. Ibn Khaldoun shared more of his insights, drawn from years of study and observation. He explained the cycles of history, how great empires rose through hard work and discipline, but fell when greed and corruption took hold. "A wise ruler," he said, "must guard against the comfort of success. Prosperity can make people forget the struggles that brought them greatness." The king nodded slowly. "But how does a ruler ensure justice?" he asked. "How can one man know the needs of so many?" Ibn Khaldoun smiled faintly. "A ruler cannot act alone," he said. "He must listen to his advisors, but he must also listen to his people. Justice comes from understanding their lives, their struggles, and their hopes." The court murmured in agreement. These were ideas they had not often heard. Ibn Khaldoun's words carried no flattery, no promises of easy answers. Instead, they offered wisdom grounded in reality. Over the years, Ibn Khaldoun became a trusted advisor to many rulers. His reputation spread across lands, from the Maghreb to Egypt and beyond. Kings admired his honesty and clarity. They sought his guidance not only in times of crisis, but also in moments of triumph, to ensure their success would last. But despite his influence, Ibn Khaldoun remained humble. He never forgot his beginnings, the boy who had sat in his father's courtyard, listening to travelers' tales. He often spoke of his early life when addressing rulers. "I was not born into power," he would say. "I have seen the struggles of ordinary people, and it is from them that true strength comes." His humility made him beloved by many. He treated everyone with respect, from the lowliest servant to the greatest king. People admired his ability to speak plainly yet wisely, making even the most complex ideas clear and relatable. One day, a young prince approached Ibn Khaldoun after a lesson. The boy's eyes were bright with curiosity. "Master," he said, "what is the most important thing a ruler must learn?" Ibn Khaldoun knelt to meet the boy's gaze. "A ruler must learn patience," he said gently. "The world is full of challenges, and decisions made in haste often lead to ruin. A wise ruler listens, thinks, and waits for the right moment to act." The prince nodded, his young mind absorbing the lesson. Ibn Khaldoun smiled, sensing the potential in the boy. "Remember," he added, "a ruler's strength is not in his sword, but in his wisdom." Ibn Khaldoun's lessons were not always easy for rulers to hear. Some kings resisted his advice, unwilling to face the hard truths he presented. But Ibn Khaldoun never softened his words to please them. He believed that honesty was the highest form of respect. One ruler, frustrated by Ibn Khaldoun's warnings, exclaimed, "You speak as if my kingdom is already doomed." Ibn Khaldoun remained calm. "I do not speak to frighten you," he said. "I speak to prepare you. A wise king does not fear the truth. He uses it to strengthen his rule." The ruler fell silent, reflecting on the scholar's words. Over time, even those who resisted Ibn Khaldoun's advice came to respect him. They saw that his wisdom came not from ambition, but from a genuine desire to help. Despite his success, Ibn Khaldoun often longed for simpler days. He missed the quiet of his study, the solitude that allowed his thoughts to flourish. He knew that his role as a teacher and advisor was important, but he also knew the toll it took on his spirit. During these moments of reflection, Ibn Khaldoun would write. His journals became a place of peace, where he could explore ideas without interruption. He recorded his thoughts on leadership, society, and human behavior, preserving them for future generations. One of his most famous teachings was this: a ruler is a shepherd, and his people are his flock. If he cares for them, they will thrive. But if he neglects them, they will scatter, and his kingdom will fall. These words resonated with rulers and scholars alike. They captured the essence of Ibn Khaldoun's philosophy. Leadership was not about power, but about responsibility. As Ibn Khaldoun grew older, his influence only deepened. He became a symbol of wisdom, a figure who bridged the worlds of scholars and kings. His lessons shaped not only the leaders of his time, but also the generations that followed. Even today, his teachings remain relevant. Modern leaders study his work, seeking guidance in a world that is still shaped by the same challenges Ibn Khaldoun observed. His legacy is a reminder that wisdom is timeless, that the lessons of history can guide us even in the present. Ibn Khaldoun's journey from a humble scholar to the teacher of kings is a testament to the power of knowledge and integrity. He showed that one voice, speaking the truth, could influence the most powerful of rulers. As he once said, "Greatness is not in ruling others, but in understanding them." Chapter 11. The final chapter. The sun was setting as Ibn Khaldoun sat in his study, the warm light streaming through the window. He was old now, his beard white and his hands worn from years of writing. The world outside his window seemed quieter than it had in his youth, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He gazed at the stacks of papers on his desk, the books he had written, and the journals he had filled. His life had been long and full of challenges, yet he had no regrets. He thought about the boy he once was, the curious child in Tunis who loved to learn, the boy who had listened to travelers' stories and dreamed of faraway lands. That boy could not have imagined the journey ahead, one filled with triumph and betrayal, wisdom and sorrow. As a young man, Ibn Khaldoun had entered the courts of powerful rulers seeking to make a difference. He had hoped to use his knowledge to guide kings and shape history. But the world of politics had been cruel. He had faced betrayal and imprisonment, moments of despair when he thought his work would never be completed. Yet, it was in those dark times that his greatest ideas were born. Alone in prison, he had begun to understand the patterns of history, the cycles of power and decline. He had written the first pages of the Muqaddimah in those moments of solitude. What had seemed like a curse had become a blessing in disguise. Now, as he looked back, Ibn Khaldun realized that every hardship had taught him something valuable. The betrayals had shown him the dangers of greed and ambition. The loneliness had taught him the strength of the human spirit. And the triumphs? They had reminded him that knowledge could overcome even the greatest challenges. He thought about the Muqaddimah, the work that had defined his life. When he first wrote it, he could not have imagined its impact. He had simply wanted to understand the world and share what he had learned. But the book had spread far and wide, inspiring scholars across continents. His ideas had been bold. He had written that societies rose and fell in cycles, that human behavior shaped history more than the actions of kings. He had studied the connections between geography, economy, and culture. And he had used logic and observation to uncover truths that others had overlooked. At first, his ideas had faced resistance. Critics called him arrogant, a man who thought he knew better than tradition. But over time, the truth of his words had been recognized. Scholars praised his work, calling him a genius ahead of his time. They saw in the Muqaddimah not just a history book, but a guide to understanding life. As he sat in his study, Ibn Khaldun smiled faintly. He had spent his life seeking knowledge, not fame. Yet his name was now remembered in places he had never seen. His work had crossed borders, inspiring thinkers in Europe, Asia, and beyond. He thought of his family, the loved ones who had supported him through the years. They had endured sacrifices, spending long periods apart as he pursued his work. His heart ached for the moments he had missed, but he took comfort in knowing that his legacy would benefit future generations, including his own children. The room grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon. Ibn Khaldun lit a small lamp, its glow soft and steady. He picked up a pen and began to write, adding to his journals. These were not meant for the world to see. They were personal reflections, a record of his thoughts as he approached the end of his journey. In one entry, he wrote, "Life is a teacher, and hardship its lesson. Through struggle, we grow strong. Through knowledge, we find meaning, and through sharing, we leave something behind." As he wrote, he thought about the future. What would the world look like in 100 years? 1,000? He knew that he could not answer these questions, but he hoped that his work would help others find their own answers. He thought of the students who had sat before him, listening eagerly as he shared his insights. Some of them had gone on to become leaders, others scholars. He hoped they would carry forward the lessons he had taught them, the importance of justice, the value of curiosity, and the need to always seek truth. Ibn Khaldun set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. The years had taken their toll on his body, but his spirit felt light. He had done what he set out to do. He had sought to understand the world and had shared his knowledge with others. Outside, the stars began to appear, their light soft and steady. Ibn Khaldun gazed at them, thinking about the vastness of the universe. He felt a sense of peace, knowing that his work was part of something greater. He had contributed to the eternal search for knowledge, a journey that connected all of humanity. In his final days, Ibn Khaldun spent much of his time in quiet reflection. Visitors came to see him, seeking his wisdom one last time. He greeted them warmly, sharing his thoughts and offering encouragement. "Remember," he told one young scholar, "the pursuit of knowledge is never-ending. Each generation builds upon the work of the last. Do not fear the questions you cannot answer. Embrace them. They are the key to discovery." When the end came, it was gentle. Ibn Khaldun passed away surrounded by those who loved him. His passing marked the end of a remarkable life, but his legacy lived on. The Muqaddimah continued to inspire, its ideas shaping the fields of history, sociology, and philosophy. Generations later, his name is still remembered. His work is studied in classrooms, his ideas debated by scholars, his life celebrated as a testament to the power of knowledge and perseverance. Ibn Khaldun's journey was not an easy one, but it was a journey of purpose. He had faced challenges and overcome them, using his experiences to create something lasting. He showed the world that one person's ideas could change the course of history. As we look back on his life, we are reminded of his greatest lesson, that the pursuit of knowledge is the greatest adventure of all. Chapter 12. The Immortal Thinker. Centuries have passed since Ibn Khaldun walked the earth. The world has changed in countless ways. Empires have risen and fallen, new technologies have transformed lives, and humanity has ventured into the stars. Yet, the name of Ibn Khaldun remains alive. His ideas, captured in the pages of the Muqaddimah, continue to inspire. His voice echoes through history, a reminder of the timeless power of knowledge. Ibn Khaldun was more than a historian. He was a thinker who dared to ask bold questions. He wanted to understand not just what happened in history, but why. His curiosity led him to study human behavior, societies, and the forces that shaped them. The Muqaddimah was the result of his journey, a masterpiece that changed the way people saw the world. Today, historians still marvel at his insights. They call him the father of sociology because he was the first to study society as a science. He showed how people's actions, beliefs, and environment influence their history. Ibn Khaldun explained that societies followed patterns. They grew strong through unity and hard work. They became weak through greed and division. His ideas revealed that history was not random. It had rules. Philosophers admire Ibn Khaldun's ability to blend reason and faith. He believed in God, but also in the power of observation. He encouraged people to think deeply, to question, and to seek the truth. His balanced approach made his work timeless, able to speak to readers of all backgrounds. Economists also find wisdom in Ibn Khaldun's words. He studied trade, wealth, and labor. He explained how prosperity could lead to both growth and decline. He warned about the dangers of corruption and the imbalance of power. Many of his ideas form the foundation of modern economics, proving his genius was far ahead of his time. But Ibn Khaldoun's influence extends beyond scholars. His ideas have inspired leaders, teachers, and ordinary people. His work teaches us to think critically, to look for patterns, and to learn from the past. He reminds us that knowledge is not just for the elite. It is for everyone. The Muqaddimah has been translated into many languages. It has traveled across the globe, finding readers in every corner of the world. Each generation discovers something new in its pages. Ibn Khaldoun's observations, written so long ago, remain relevant. They help us understand not only history, but the challenges we face today. Why do his ideas endure? Perhaps it is because they are rooted in truth. Ibn Khaldoun did not write to please kings or follow trends. He wrote because he wanted to understand life. His honesty, his courage to question, and his commitment to learning have made his work timeless. In classrooms, students read his words and are amazed by their power. How could he know so much about our world? They ask. The answer lies in his method. Ibn Khaldoun did not simply record events. He observed them, analyzed them, and found meaning in them. His work is a guide, showing us how to think and learn. One of Ibn Khaldoun's greatest lessons is about the cycle of history. He taught that no empire lasts forever. Strength leads to weakness, and wealth leads to corruption. But he also showed that understanding these cycles gives us power. If we recognize the patterns, we can make better choices. Another lesson is about the importance of justice. Ibn Khaldoun believed that a society's success depended on its leaders. Just rulers who cared for their people created strong, united nations. Corrupt rulers, however, brought division and ruin. This idea remains as true today as it was in his time. Ibn Khaldoun's humility also speaks to us. Despite his brilliance, he remained grounded. He never sought fame or power. He wrote and taught because he believed in the value of knowledge. His life reminds us that true greatness comes from serving others and seeking truth. As the centuries pass, Ibn Khaldoun's name continues to inspire. His work has been celebrated in both the East and the West. Scholars in Europe during the Renaissance were amazed by his ideas. Modern thinkers see him as a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. In his lifetime, Ibn Khaldoun faced many challenges. He was betrayed, imprisoned, and criticized. But he never gave up. Instead, he turned his struggles into strength. His hardships gave him the insight to write something extraordinary. His story is a testament to resilience, to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity. Ibn Khaldoun's journey also teaches us about the value of curiosity. He asked questions that no one else dared to ask. He looked at the world with fresh eyes, seeing connections that others missed. His curiosity led him to uncover truths that still guide us today. His legacy is not just in his books. It is in the way we think about history, society, and ourselves. He showed us that knowledge is a tool, a way to make sense of the world. His life reminds us that learning is a journey, one that never truly ends. Today, we live in a fast-changing world. Technology connects us, but it also divides us. Societies face challenges that Ibn Khaldoun could never have imagined. Yet, his ideas remain relevant. They remind us to look for patterns, to seek justice, and to value knowledge. Imagine Ibn Khaldoun sitting in his study, writing by the light of a candle. He could not have known how far his words would travel. He could not have known that centuries later, his name would be spoken with respect and admiration. But perhaps he hoped. Perhaps he believed that the truth he sought would endure. As we reflect on his legacy, we are reminded of his greatest lesson, that understanding the world requires both courage and humility. Ibn Khaldoun dared to ask the big questions. He faced his challenges with strength and turned his ideas into a gift for future generations. Ibn Khaldoun's story is a story of hope. It shows us that one person's ideas can change the world. It reminds us that knowledge has no boundaries, no limits. His work continues to inspire, a beacon of light in the ever-changing currents of history. The immortal thinker lives on in his words, in the ideas he shared, and in the minds of those who continue to learn from him. Ibn Khaldoun is not just a figure of the past. He is a guide for the present and the future. His legacy is a call to action, to think, to question, and to seek truth.